Hi, today we're going to talk a bit about a scapegoat and an introduction into what a scapegoat is and a little tiny bit of how it's formed, but later on we're going to go much more into detail in that. A scapegoat is a lonely journey. When you're a scapegoat, it's a very lonely journey. You feel very much isolated on your own. You feel set apart, but not in a good way. We're going to go through my book, A Scapegoat No More Forever. You can find it on Amazon.com. There's also a full course. They're both going to be linked in the description below. But just kind of jumping into that introduction of a scapegoat, scapegoats are made to feel bad or that they're wrong, something's wrong with them, but not in a let me try to fix you, help you way, but in a way you're bad, therefore you deserve constant punishment. And punishment can look a lot of ways, which we're going to talk more about in a little bit. But realizing that we've been made to feel bad for so long, because of that, a large part of our behavior is driven by the need to prove that we're not bad. We're trying to prove that we're good, even to strangers. So this can cause us to not have boundaries, just any boundaries in general. We can get caught in people-pleasing cycles, acceptance-seeking behaviors. Also, we can have a long line of toxic behaviors where we allow people to take a lot from us. We really get caught up in sort of like defending and explaining ourselves because we're so worried. We have such a long relationship of being the bad one. We can also have a lot of toxic guilt and toxic shame. I really like John Bradshaw's book, Healing the Shame That Binds You. That is something we're going to talk more about later as well. I also wrote about his book in my book. It's so powerful, so helpful. So if you're dealing a lot with shame and toxic shame, that's a great one. It's hard to kind of know what is shame and what is toxic shame. What does that even mean? But we're going to clearly identify those and break those down later on as we go through this series. It is painful to be a scapegoat, and you could be scapegoated by an individual, by a family, by an entity, an organization. It could be even a romantic partner. I think for a lot of us, we've been scapegoated in family systems, but wherever you were scapegoated, the ideas that we're going to cover is going to help with all of it. So it really doesn't matter where your origins stem from. I think so often when we're scapegoated, we are so focused on the other person when we finally get to that point where it's like, hey, I don't think this is me, right? When you keep saying, if I could just do these 3 things, then you would love me. Or if I could just do these 3 things, the relationship would move forward. But I've done these 3 things for a while now and nothing's changes. So is it still me, right? When we kind of start to figure out, is it me or is it you guys, or is it you? When you start to turn that ship, we can almost get obsessed with the people that have been scaping us because we want to figure it out. Being scapegoated is almost just crazy making. We always are feeling so bad when we also know that we're not, right? That we are trying to do good things, but how do we keep ending up the bad guy? So when we start getting fixated on that, I think that's a natural part of the process, but the hope is at some point we kind of turn the ship and start to look back at ourselves in a healthy way. So that's really what the book is dedicated to, understanding what the origins are, what happens to us because of it, and some of the behaviors that we take with us into the rest of our relationships that just do not serve us. In fact, they cause us a lot of problems. So in looking more at the origins of a scapegoat and knowing that we have to deal with that battle of that guilt and that toxic guilt, we're more worried about it not being our fault sometimes than we are about what happens to us. Doesn't mean that we don't care about what happens to us, but even when someone wrongs us, we're more worried about proving we weren't asking for it or it wasn't our fault. That's another thing. When you grow up in a family system that is toxic and that is scapegoating, then we get so focused on trying to prove that we're not bad. If we were to talk about the abuse, that's treated as worse than the abuse, right? So the worst thing you could do is talk about the abuse rather than someone recognizing and understanding how bad the abuse was. So we just learn to keep our mouths shut and we just bury it. It's really hard when you're a scapegoat because the family system, especially if we're looking at family systems, they need a scapegoat to carry what's wrong with the system. So that's the job of the scapegoat. Everything that the family can't deal with, whether it's emotional or financial, relational, any of the shame, any of the secrets, the hate, the anger, the pain, all of that gets dumped into the scapegoat, and that's the scapegoat's job to carry it. And then we're supposed to just be summoned when they need to dump more on us, and then when they're done, they send us away, right? So it's just that cycle of being summoned and then sent away, summoned and sent away. And it's so painful and confusing, especially for a child. It's really hard for a child to understand how, the person that is supposed to love them keeps treating them like they hate them. Even for us as adults, trying to love someone who's treating you like they hate you is so incredibly painful and confusing. And it's really hard to know what to do with that, because we're not supposed to deal with that, right? If you're treated like you're hated, it's supposed to be by someone who hates you, not someone who's supposed to love you. You see how that, I'm hoping I'm explaining that well. So thinking of that, being treated like you're less than and being made to feel like you're less than, the system oftentimes can also treat you less than. So anyone in the system can treat you however they want. They're allowed to lie about you, hit you, steal from you, be just flat out rude to you, humiliate you, and the poor behavior is not corrected. In fact, a lot of times it's encouraged, right? So it's like, oh yeah, you really got that person, or you really showed them. And the scapegoat is always just carrying so much pain. It's just constant pain in their lives, and it's really lonely. And again, they're not allowed to speak out about the poor treatment. They're supposed to just take it and then walk away until they're summoned again. A scapegoat in a relationship is similar. So let's say it's in a romantic relationship. A lot of times the scapegoat is doing 1,000 times more work than the other party, and yet they're still being made to feel like they don't do enough. Like what they're doing just isn't good enough, or it's not enough, or they need to contribute more, or if they would just stop doing this and start doing this, then the relationship would get better. So they're just kind of doggy paddling. It's like treading water constantly, right? So it's really freeing when we start to kind of let go of the need to prove that we're good and realize that we were always good, that we were never bad, and that it's not our job to prove that we're good to anyone, right? That's not supposed to be our job, because you can't prove it anyways. All you can do is live within your integrity. You decide what it is you value, and you find a way to live within that system, that value system, and it's your job to make your decisions based off of that. But if you're being scapegoated, you are not encouraged to have your own value system. You're encouraged to try to live up to some invisible, impossible, contradictory set of terms that just aren't real. Another huge thing to understand, this role of scapegoat is a role that was assigned to you. This is not something you chose. So as an adult, it's like, okay, if this was a role and it was assigned to me, I think I'm good. I don't think I want it anymore. I'm going to go ahead and pass that back, or I'm going to just put that in the garbage, right? Either way, that's not a role I'm willing to carry any further. That was not something I ever chose, not something I ever wanted. I, in fact, don't like the way this feels. So I'm just going to go ahead and let that go, like taking a cape off, right? This was assigned to me. I'm good. I've put my time in, and we're going to talk more about that in a few videos to come as well. So realizing that you're not to anything to be treated poorly, right? Because when you're in a romantic relationship and someone is scapegoating you, you're either going to be too clingy or too laughy or too jokey or not jokey enough or too angry or too sad, or you're always too something for a person to not love you. And that's their excuse to keep dumping their shame on you. Remember, that's a huge part of what a scapegoat's role is. It's to carry the shame and to be the secret keeper. And a lot of times in a family system, the scapegoat's secret is just how poorly their own family is treating them. They really carry that and try to hide that from everyone else as well. So they don't get support outside of the system, and they're not getting support in the system. Hopefully you're starting to see like, this is why this is so lonely. This is why it's such a painful journey, and it's so incredibly difficult. So looking at this, knowing, okay, what's the truth? The truth is that it's a role. It was never my job. I don't like carrying everybody's shame and anger and hate and pain and secrets. I have my own pain. I have my own shame. I have my own secrets. I have enough to carry on my own. It's not my job to carry it. So I'm going to go ahead and think about, what does that look like for me to hand that role back? What does it look like for me to just let go of that role? What would I have to do? And it's scary. It's so scary, because the system or the person who's scapegoating you is usually pretty good at letting you know they can discard you just like that, that you are replaceable, you're nothing, you don't mean anything, who cares if you disappear tomorrow, right? And so for some reason, feeling like you're so invaluable also makes us want to prove our value. So the thought of, whoa, if I really just let go and I didn't feel that need, or I wasn't trying to prove that I'm valuable anymore, then they're really never going to love me. Then they're really going to let me go. They're really going to be without me. So that's why it's a process. So it's not something that you have to or are probably going to be able to do overnight or in a moment. It's a process. It's a journey that we work through and get up to. So I hope you're along for the ride. I hope that something you heard today was helpful and empowering, especially the one thing that stands out to me is knowing that it was a role that was assigned to you. That's it. It's not you. It has nothing to do with you. You were never bad. It was a role that was assigned to you, and then it was reinforced over and over and over. And now we can see like, oh, this is why I chase rejection. This is why I people please. This is why I do these acceptance seeking behaviors. This is why I explain and defend myself constantly, even when I should be more worried about how I was just treated than trying to prove that I'm innocent to why I was treated bad. Hopefully you can kind of see that dynamic. I almost feel like that needs a little cartoon video to explain that process. But if you've been through it, you know what I'm talking about. So remember, you can grab the book on Amazon, A Scapegoat No More Forever. I'm hoping that you're making a choice to, at some point, let go of that role, at least hopefully starting to separate yourself from the role like, okay, that's not me. That was a role assigned to me. And it may have even been assigned by people I love, people who are supposed to love me, but nonetheless, that was just a role that was assigned to me. So I hope you take good care, and I'm going to see you in the next one.